All right, we are live. Hello and welcome everyone to MBA Waves. It is Tuesday evening here in France. I'm broadcasting live from Strasbourg today in the east of France, joined by my usual co-host Bara Eric and our special guest Travis Morgan. I'm going to introduce in a second. Just a little intro about who MBA Waves are. Once again, we are this vidcast, I like to say now, instead of a podcast, because we're video now, so modern. Founded by coaches in the MBA GMAT space, and we get into different topics each week that are hopefully interesting and help you progress in your MBA and GMAT journey. And often we have special guests, so you can find our program schedule on the website mbawaves.com. And if you click on past episodes now, you can see previously recorded episodes that you might find helpful that you can watch on your own time as well. So without further ado, I'm going to let Bara introduce herself. Want to take it away, Bara?
I'll take it away, Eric. It's so great to be here. I'm Bara Eric with City Test Prep, and we're a full-service test preparation company. We actually teach many tests, middle school through medical boards, but we've been teaching the GMAT and the GRE, oh gosh, since the last century. And we deal with students that have test anxiety, time management issues. We're a boutique firm, and I'm going to give the weather report because I always do. It's pretty sunny and quiet in the East Bay of Northern California. It's great to see everyone.
Thanks, Bara. All right, so here's our special guest, Travis Morgan. Take it away, Travis.
Eric, thanks. Yeah, my name's Travis Morgan, and I've worked in the test prep space for quite some time and also in admissions consulting. In fact, I think I'm the only person I know who personally does both test prep and admissions consulting. So I founded MBA Whisperer just a couple of years ago. Prior to that, I ran a division of Veritas Prep, one of the largest test prep and admissions consulting firms in the world. And and I'm here from sunny Southern California, and it's a great day today. It's a little chilly, Bara, but man, sunny and beautiful.
We're California dreaming, that's for sure.
That's right.
Out here.
Well, here all the leaves are brown still, and the sky is gray, so I'm pretty jealous. All right, so once again, my name is Eric Lacrizzia, broadcasting live from France. This may or may not be coffee in my mug, and I am the former director of recruitment for the global MBA program at ESSEC Business School here in France and in Singapore, and I have left and went on my own, rogue, as our friend Petio would say, to create my own admissions consulting firm known as Candidate Coach. And I work with people from all over the world who are targeting MBA programs and sometimes master's programs anywhere in the world as well. So happy to be with you tonight as well. And we're going to dive into today's topic, which is all about GMAT and other test prep anxiety and how to manage it, how to approach the GMAT without freaking out, without panicking. So I'm going to ask most of the questions and ask my guests to chime in, respond whenever they see fit. So I'm just going to get started, right? So let's talk about it. GMAT, GRE, and other standardized tests, like what are some of the reasons people tend to get anxious about it?
Bara, do you want to kick us off?
Well, first, I want to say I'm so delighted to be here with you, Travis, because we've known each other for so long. Yep. And we're such a nice compliment with the work that we do, and there's lots of love. Yes. And yes. It's really great because the perspective that I think that you probably bring to this conversation is as an independent person and also working for the big company, right? The companies are going to have a party line of how they deal with things. I worked for Princeton Review for a long time, and they would basically say, well, you can't do those things, right? So I think it's really wonderful that we can actually bring these different perspectives to this conversation. And as far as the question and kicking it off, people have lots of baggage around being judged, and they have a lot of baggage about performance, and whether it's peers at work, colleagues, friends, partners, family members, really anyone that they tell. I had a client who was working in, under Condoleezza Rice, and like Condoleezza Rice knew when she was Secretary of State, and he's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen when she finds, you? And it was like, we had to unpack it. Like we had to really talk about what is performance anxiety and what's really at stake here and what's going on. And what I always tell clients is like, really, your job is just to go in and be your best self. Like that's it. And then having coaches and tutors, that, and we're going to unpack this today, but really people get freaked out because they're being judged. I mean, that's the bottom line. They've had a bad experience. They've had trauma around taking the test. But those are two of the ones that I see quite a lot. What about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, I think that's a great point, right? I mean, literally you're being judged. I mean, a score comes out on the other side, right? And so it is, one of the most judgmental processes you could possibly go through. I think too, it's legitimately high stakes, right? I mean, this is something that matters, right? And so it's going to matter to where you end up going to school. That could impact your future career, that could impact your future life. It's there's legitimate stakes involved there, and so there's going to be anxiety about that. Anyone who's hit submit on an application to a school, you feel that, like, as you're hitting submit, right? I mean, you have this emotional response. I mean, it is high stakes. Yeah, right, Eric? So yeah, and then I like to joke that it's like you're asked, you just want to progress in your career, right? Like, this is what we want to do. We want to go to business school. We want to, take that next step. And yet they ask you to do something that most of us are not good at, of taking a test. I like to say, it's like saying, oh yeah, I want to take, this next step, but you have to go do this ballet recital to prove yourself, worthy of it, right? Like, you're not good at it. And it's, something that, it causes you a ton of anxiety. And there's a lot of elements of it that are not related to, what you ultimately want to achieve. That's going to cause a lot of anxiety, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so funny that you say the ballet recital, because I remember the Black Swan. The actress is not coming to mind. Natalie Portman. I read that she had studied ballet for that movie for years in order to come across as a prima ballerina. And so you really don't want to spend a couple years working on the GMAT to become a GMAT expert, right? That's not
right.
the goal. But that's the way, you have to approach it, that it is that serious, that you need to go in an authentic way and show up for the exam. And you don't want to spend 2 years. You don't even want to spend 1 year on it. Right? You really don't. It's not about the GMAT. It's just about these different hoops that you need to move through and show your best self.
Yep.
Yeah, I've always kind of looked at the GMAT as it's this marathon test, right? It's like it used to be 4, now it's 3.5 hours. It's significant, and to be able to maintain that level of focus, concentration, and like hardiness in solving problems and so on, you don't just walk into that overnight. And like when people practice for the GMAT, I never understand why people like do. Oh, I did this like 20-minute mini exam to like assess. It's like you don't practice for the marathon by running sprints, and so
true.
You definitely don't want to be spending a year or like. I think there's a big cultural, linguistic element to it, right? But something like between 2 and 6 months max, right? Do you guys agree?
I would say that's true. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I will have people who've come to me who've already spent, 6 months or more or much more, to that point. But, you can, it does not have to take that long.
Right.
No, right. The thing is, it's a coachable test. All of these tests are coachable. So it's funny because you have these questions that you might not have seen since 8th grade, or these concepts that you might not have seen, or you might be a fluent English speaker, but you might read a magazine like People more than you read The Economist, right? And so your English is going to just be at a different place than the test actually is testing. And the way that I like to approach it is that the way that we do some things are the way that we do all things, right? And so you want to actually go into the test and really take the opportunity to really, really learn it and go through your application and your essays and really show up and really do. I mean, it's work, it's personal work. It's not just putting stuff out. It's actually going in, right? It's so.
I love that diplomatic answer of like when you're talking about People versus The Economist, it's just in a different place. That's lovely. I think when I think about, I don't know, like my English when I spent too much time away from the States, my English is in a different place now, or maybe a better place.
Well, you're in France.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me ask you guys, what are some of the things, like the signs to look for if stress or anxiety is having an impact on improving your score? Like, how does test anxiety typically manifest?
Travis, you go. You kick it off.
For me, yeah, I mean, honest to goodness, I just ask my clients when they get done with an exam, how did you feel about it? Right? How did you feel about the exam? And they will be able to tell me, pretty clearly. If they said, hey, the first few questions I was really shaky, and it took me a little bit, to get into the exam, and I will remind them, listen, it takes me a few questions to get into the exam, right? And I've been teaching this sucker for 15 years, right? That it's not like an if I get anxiety, it's a when I get anxiety, what am I going to do kind of a thing, right? That we view it as almost like if I experience anxiety, something's wrong, right? That like, oh, this is not how the test should go. And it's we're gonna feel it. We're gonna feel it. And so, as Bara often, talks about is having these strategies, to where we can do it. So, yeah, what are the signs? I think a lot of times is where I see it is where you have a shaky beginning, right? That the first few questions are just not at your true ability level, and then often there'll be where it took you a while to get into the exam, and so that causes timing issues, and so you see this huge slump at the end as well. I don't know, Bara, thoughts, on your side as well?
Yeah. So from just a practical standpoint, I think that anxiety shows up either as a mental issue, right?
Mm,
Like focus issues or getting distracted or thinking too fast, thinking too slow, or physical issue, right?
mm,
Stomach ache, can't sleep the night before, sweating, dry mouth, right? So you have these things that in any kind of anxious situation that you're going to have physical responses to. And then in terms of where it happens, I'll add, I agree with everything that you say, Travis. Also, if they've had bad experiences with tests before,
mhm,
they sometimes go in like, okay, anxiety, come on. Like they're just ready for it. They're like inviting it. And unless you do something about anxiety, the way that it works is that if you did well at one point with a tiny little bit of anxiety, your brain can't tell the difference between anxiety and excitement. And
mm,
so if you do well, your mind actually thinks that you need that anxiety. And so it convinces you to feel even more anxious the next time.
mm,
So, so unless you actually cut off that line, right?
mm,
Then every time you take a test, it's going to get more and more and more. That's my understanding from more of the wellness space, right?
mhm,
Because what I do with clients is I do hypnosis, I do neurolinguistic program, I do all of this like woo woo stuff, this mind work. It's called change work, and I'm drawing in from there, but not everyone needs that. Not everyone needs this huge amount of support. Some of it's just, wow, when I listen to this music, it really calms me down. Or when
mm,
I go out for a walk before I study, it feels really good. Or if you do get nervous with those first few questions, well, before you take the test, do a few questions, like have a few questions, like
yep.
start earlier or convince yourself you're starting earlier. So yeah, I like to figure out what are the symptoms and then how are we gonna deal with it.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah.
That's like a really adapted approach. I mean, I see anxiety as a very human, very neurochemical response to stress, that when you face something that's important, when the stakes are high, whether it's like asking someone on a date or like, I don't know, skydiving or like,
It's vulnerable, it's vulnerability, right?
yeah, exactly. But it's a response that we have, right? And just like when you put your hand on a hot stove and like you have that pain response, it's like anxiety that's out of control is when if imagine you took your hand away from the stove, but you're still feeling that pain ongoing.
mm,
So that's like the chronic anxiety that might manifest. It's a very popularized term, right? Popular psychology, but so its meaning I think has gotten maybe warped or broadened. So yeah, I think addressing it in a very as you were describing, Bara, a specific approach that's adapted to each person, like what symptoms they're showing, is a very appropriate way to deal with it. All right. Well, speaking of dealing with it, like let's talk strategies. Like, you go to your shrink and it's like, I don't want to talk about mother. Just give me some strategies. Like, let's dive into some of the strategies that people can use to combat or manage the stress they feel related to tests? Like, you guys are in the trenches with your clients, like, dish the dirt. Like, I want to hear about it. No names, of course.
Bara, why don't you kick this one off?
Well, I first of all, I think the first thing that's important is that the student believes that what you're doing is going to help them. Because if I work with them and I'm doing a holistic modality that is a little more out there and they don't believe in it, then they're not going to get buy-in, right? So it's really, it's almost like if you teach someone plugging in, right, Travis? Like, you teach them plugging in or back solving, and you're like, no, really, you can do this technique to solve this math question. Trust me, right? If they don't trust you and they don't know that just by tweaking something a little bit, it's going to make a difference.
Yep.
I think that probably a lot, and Travis, tell me if you do this, is I would call probably a lot of what you do is exposure therapy, which is that you probably didn't know this, but it's like the more someone sees a question and the more someone goes through the actions and the more someone actually lives through the test, you actually take away the sting, because they become familiar, they have a lot of practice, and they move through it. The stuff that I do just adds to that. It's just another layer of giving people an opportunity to see what's happening for themselves. If they're not sleeping the night before, it's like, okay, well, are you sleeping 2 nights before? Because that's actually really the most important night to sleep before a test. And if you're not sleeping, giving them some ways of going to sleep better that don't involve meds. I mean, you don't want to do anything new. A lot of tutors will do breathing techniques. What do you do, Travis? What are some of the techniques that you use?
A few different things. So, as you mentioned, I think number one thing that I do is just, I didn't know that I was doing exposure therapy, but is that doing a number of practice exams before the actual exam, just going in, planning on taking it at least twice, so that there's no, it just reduces the pressure on any individual exam, right? And because if you just think, oh, I've got to just do this one and done and get it out of there, suddenly the pressure on that exam goes through the roof, right? And so I do both of those things. A lot of it too is just having that legitimate confidence that you can do it, right? Just walking into the exam knowing, hey, I've done it 2-3 times before and gotten the target score that I'm looking for. And so that again kind of reduces the pressure on any individual exam. One of the things that I do that you talked a little bit about as far as our emotions, right? And the difference between anxiety and excitement, and our body doesn't tell the difference. And so I do work with them on some exercises called recharacterizing your emotions. And this comes from sports psychology, right? If you're a basketball fan and you're standing on the free throw line and the game is up to you, right? Even if you are a professional, you're gonna feel that pressure. You are, right? They're not superhuman; they are human. And so, some of the exercises that it's very simple. In fact, I tried this myself in a fear of my own. I have a mild claustrophobia, and I did this in a caving exercise where I was in a little tiny tube about this big, and you close your eyes, take a deep breath, and you say, I'm so excited to be here, right? And those same symptoms of the racing heart rate, right? The sweaty palms, all of this, they're the same as when you're excited. And so you can send the emotion back to your brain saying, oh, I'm not anxious, I'm excited in the moment. And sure enough, even when I was in this very constrained space as a mild claustrophobic, I felt it. And it really works. Mm-hmm.
That's great. I love that. So much sports psychology is applicable to students. And I find more than other tests that we teach, that actually there's more people who are in sports that take the GMAT than say the LSAT and the GRE.
Yeah.
I don't know if you found that. Like, there's just
Absolutely.
more. So it's really easy to make that transition for them. And so what I would add to what you were talking about, Travis, is that when you're feeling that emotion come up, that excitement, that discomfort, what we often feel is this energy coming up towards us, like that it's a panic. Like if someone feels that panic,
Yep.
what I have students do is imagine they're taking it outside of themselves, like a basketball, the size of a basketball, and then push it in the opposite direction. Like literally almost imagine it's going in the opposite direction. And then I tell them, close your eyes, then throw in a time that you had really inappropriate laughter. Like, and so what it does is it cuts through, right?
Yep.
You want to do a pattern disconnect, right? So this is the second pattern disconnect. Then you throw in thinking about someone you love or some time that you felt comfortable and safe. It's similar, and then you put it back in, take a deep breath. So that's the way that I would approach when you're in that moment, because when you're in that cave and that claustrophobic, those feelings are coming up. So if that, oh, I'm so excited, this is so great, which is kind of reframing, right?
Yep.
Like it's
Exactly.
like seeing it or pivoting, but it's the same thing. I throw in it's a neuro-linguistic programming exercise, and I throw that in, and I just layer them on. I just layer on. It never sticks. If a student, we want them to have a toolbox, and what you also said that you didn't call it this, but it's also talk therapy, right? That you're doing with students, because you're basically like saying, so what happened? How did you feel?
Yeah.
What's going on? I mean, we're really drawing from these other fields to help students, and then we're giving them skills for life. They're only getting a great score, but we're giving them something that's going to help in the boardroom before a presentation. I'm watching Zelensky and how he's handling everything. I'm watching how he is just so centered and grounded, and I think he's feeding off of us also believing in him and trusting him. So if we have family members and friends that are in belief of what we're doing and that we can do it, that really helps a lot too.
I agree.
Can you imagine, like, this? The Ukraine is not like the most visible country on the map. Like people hear about the US, China, UK all the time. And then suddenly you're thrust into the forefront of the whole world knows your name, and most people seem to be behind the guy. That's going to be an incredibly empowering feeling in the face of the biggest threat he's ever faced in his life.
Right.
Holy crap. And thank God for that. What you guys are saying is really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing all that stuff. And I kind of pick up on some themes of confidence in yourself, but also in your trainer or coach, like you guys, basically the kind of like magic feather that Dumbo has to believe in that these techniques will work, and believing in it is so much. I think confidence is actually everything in pretty much every domain. So let's just talk a little bit about results. We just have a few minutes left. What kind of results do you see? How effective are these techniques?
So one of the things too that I like to emphasize is if you go into the GMAT just thinking that it's a math test and an English test, you're going to plateau out because a lot of what they're testing, they don't tell you that they're testing this. I like to joke that it's, like going into a game and they've only told you half the rules, right? And so a big part of what I emphasize too is having frameworks that you can use to approach the questions, because of how we typically approach this exam is that we just study the content, right? We just study more and more. Oh my gosh, I need to study probability even more than I studied it before. Oh my gosh, I feel like I need to study weighted average even more than I did before, right? These content-oriented things, and absolutely, you've got to have that foundation of content. You must. You don't know how to do the problems, you are not going to go into that test confidently. However, what throws a lot of people off is when we take a test in school, high school, college, whatever it might be, it basically is just asking us to regurgitate the knowledge that we already know. It's a content-oriented exam, right? So we've seen these problems before, and we just spit back our knowledge. How the GMAT is different, how there's kind of a twist here, is it is testing our problem-solving skills. I like to say it's not trying to find the best mathematician or even the best grammarian. They're trying to find the best detective, right? Who can notice the clues, who can notice the details that matter, right? Who can understand the big picture of where we're going, but also understand how we're going to get there. These sorts of things. So I'm really focused on teaching frameworks of like, when I see this, here's the framework that I approach this type of problem with, even if I have no idea what to do. And so you can just fall back to the framework. And I have found this to be just wildly successful. One of the quotes that I have on my website, MBAWhisperer.com, is that is from a client who had worked with, no exaggeration, 7 or 8 tutors before he got to me. And he had still plateaued out in the mid 600s through all of that work. And he said, Travis, from the first time we spoke, I knew something was different, right? And wouldn't you know it, even starting in mid 600s, he improved by over 100 points. He ended up going to Harvard. He just graduated this past year. Yeah. So yeah, just a really exciting story about how a little different way of approaching, not just pounding in the same things that you've been doing for the past 6 months, but seeing it from a little different perspective can make a huge difference. I mean, I only worked with him for 1 month, and he popped his score over 100 points. So yes, it can make a big difference.
Yeah, I love how this idea of frameworks. That I think that's such a great way of thinking about it, and that it really is a test about critical thinking. It really is a test about not just about the numbers. And people get so exasperated, but I know this and I've been studying for so long and I really understand probabilities, right? But really it's how are you going to think through? I love the detective piece. I usually tell people to think, well, my tutors teach this, but when I talk to students about it, what would a business leader do, right? Are they going to make a decision that is all risk and there's no safety there? Like how to think like a business leader would do this, and even to think, what business leader do you want to think about who's taking it and what would they do, right? So to emulate the thought patterns and to the problem solving, it's as important on the test because it's really simulating how you're going to be as a business professional as much as it is about math and grammar, right? And it really isn't just like you can study, but unless you understand that it's testing your timing and it's testing, do you know how to take shortcuts? Do you not know how to you don't want to make rash decisions. So all this stuff is actually baked in and you can't see it because it's all in metaphor of test questions. It's all metaphor. So we're on the same page there for sure.
Absolutely. As we have been for about a decade.
I know, it's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true.
So you guys have known each other for a long time. I'm just meeting Travis tonight.
That's
Bara,
right.
Pleasure for just about a year now. I think it was around February, March. Even though we launched around, I think, early April, maybe. In any case, all right. So we have like a minute left. I just want to ask, like, I guess maybe it's the hardest question. Like, what do you do if you're not seeing results? That kind of balance between pushing yourself to do better and acceptance of, who you are or where you're at. Like, what's the best approach to deal with this? In just a couple of words, if you're not seeing results.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of what's important is not just looking at what you're getting wrong, but how you're getting them questions wrong. Like, how are you not answering it correctly, and what track are you going down? And then you want to actually triage and correct that. And learning disability is always also an issue if you have some like learning divergent thing happening, but things are usually, even if you go against the grain and you always answer a certain way and it's always wrong, it's like, well, then you actually just need to answer in the way that it's more correct and get it almost so that you have a visceral response to those particular questions. And yeah, Travis, what do you want to say about that?
I would say that perhaps the number one thing that I see, this is both on the quant and on the verbal, that tends to hold people back is the very earliest part of your approaching of the question. So like the first 30 seconds, like what are you doing with that time? What most people are doing is they're rushing. And so if, the framework that I use for this is very simple, called analyze, then execute, right? It's like if we can split these two things into separate stages so that we don't feel like we have to get in and do all this math right away, right? Or get in and, and just fix all this grammar right away. But if we can, train ourselves, to even under time constraints, utilize those first 30 seconds of the problem more effectively, what you'll find is you know where you're going with wrong, you know what you're solving for, you know what you've already got, and you can take one step and see what you're doing rather than feeling like you just have to jump in and do a whole bunch of math. This is the number one thing that I see with people who have kind of hit a plateau and they're not improving. As Bara says, it's different for everybody, but yeah, that's my number one tip.
That's like that comes up to the detective piece we were just saying, or house MD, right? Like you want to house MD the questions, and you want to see like what's actually going on, like what's the lay of the land here, because there shouldn't be any surprises on the test, right? There should not, like you're not going to have seen any of these questions, but they are the same kinds of things over and over again, and some of them could be a marriage between different concepts. And some of them can be this blend, but if you work with a great tutor like Travis or our tutors, or there's other great tutors that are out there, if you work with someone who really brings you through the questions and thinking through, you're gonna get to where you want to go. And if you don't, then you want to actually step back and say, well, what am I not doing right? What's not in check? Is it test taking strategy? Is it a concept? Do you have to master something in the content? Is it your time management, right? Like taking 30 seconds is not that big of an investment of time, but it can radically change how you answer the question, and it could really make a big difference. Or is it your mindset? Are you going in really nervous, and is that dragging you down? And so you want to really be honest with yourself as to what you need to do to manifest your best self when you go in to take the test.
Awesome. Thanks, Bara, and thanks, Travis. I'm looking to see if there's any questions. I don't see anything coming in. And I'm going to conclude the episode in just a second, unless you guys have any other final tidbits to add.
Eric, and Bara, thanks for having me. And, happy to come back anytime.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Bara. We've been serving you GMAT prep realness here on MBA Waves. And next week, I hope you join us because we'll be talking about a really kind of controversial topic. Is an MBA right for an entrepreneur? So next week on March 15th, we'll be diving into that topic. Hope to see you then. And that's all I have to say. See you next Tuesday.
Thank you, Travis.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Bara. Bye.